Good afternoon, good evening, and welcome to episode number 94 of the Final Round Drag Racing Podcast. We're coming to you not live from the FingerLakes1.com studios in downtown Seneca Falls, New York. Just wanted to let everybody know why there's a little bit of a change here. We are back after a bit of a summer break. It's going to be a bit of a standard here as we work through the rest of the summer, mostly for no other reason other than soccer. Soccer is getting in the way, so to say, of us being able to congregate live in Seneca Falls. But nonetheless, here we are. Brian, geez, wrong show. Pete Sanca joining us on the Microsoft Teams chat, along with Jason Oldfield. Everybody checking in, guys. Thanks for coming on and getting one in this week. You know, even though it's looking like it's going to be a washout this weekend, nonetheless, here we are able to come back with number 94 of the final round.
Yeah, no problem, Chris. I don't know what the weather is out Pete's way, but considering that it's 100% chance of showers out here for Saturday, I'm guessing it's probably not going to be much different a few hours to the east of here.
We actually, and thanks for having me, guys. I appreciate it. It's if you hear any bangs in the background, we're in the middle of a pretty good thunderstorm right now. But they changed. I don't know what it is. My closest track is 2.5 hours away. I'm not sure what the forecast is there, but the forecast actually got a little better here for this weekend.
Oh, it did?
Yeah, it's just kind of a chance of a spotty thunderstorm throughout the whole weekend, as opposed to it wasn't looking very good midweek. That's for sure.
Yeah, well, that's interesting. Yeah, because at Empire, so Empire Dragways, our local track, they
Yep.
had a fairly good race going on this week. John Serra Jr. is a promoter putting on the twin $7,500 to win races. It was supposed to be Saturday, Sunday, and there was supposed to be a $3,000 to win warm up today. And sometime yesterday, they made the decision that, hey, you know what, the weather forecast looks terrible, so
Yeah.
they decided to bag the whole weekend and postpone it to some date in the future. But yeah, I don't, like I said, I just assumed last time I looked at the weather forecast was yesterday. And once they canceled the race, I was like, well, don't have to look at the weather anymore.
That's right. That's easy.
So yeah, do appreciate you coming on, Pete. We talked a little bit, about you coming on basically over the last couple of months. Like Chris said, we've kind of taken a somewhat of a summer hiatus. I mean, yes, it was Chris's kids with soccer games, but he wasn't the only one either. My daughter graduated from high school. I had
Nice.
it was my daughter's birthday, graduation from high school, my mom's 80th birthday. I forget what the
Wow.
heck else. And like I said, Chris had soccer tournaments and stuff. And so yeah, here we are. It's been like a month since we got on, so I'm glad you're able to finally get on and join us, especially since we're a day late. Hopefully, we're not a dollar short, but we are a day late.
Am I the first one off for your break?
Yes.
Yeah,
Wow.
yeah,
You
yeah.
guys
You're the
must be
first
hard
guest.
up for guests, you poor guys.
No, bringing out the thunder.
Yeah, yeah. Start off soft, and then you just work your way back into
I guess if you want to say that, sure.
it.
So, I mean, one question that I always ask people, Pete, and I love to find this out from people. It's like, how did you get your start in drag racing?
So, like I've talked to you, Jason, Lebanon Valley is my home track, and my cousin Tim Tasmer has a green, bright green '55 Chevy wagon, and my father had a summer home in Massachusetts, about 45 minutes from the track.
Okay.
And we would go probably 4 or 5 times a year to go watch him. And obviously, I enjoyed it. I wound working for a guy. My first real job was at a gas station, and the owner of the gas station was an old super stock racer.
Okay.
And one thing led to another, and me and my dad built my Vega strictly for the street with a little 305 dual exhaust, 4 barrel.
No
And
kidding.
he retired, moved up to Massachusetts, sold his business to this guy that I went to work for.
Okay.
Ms. John Maturo, by the way. And my father came down to visit one day, and as he walks into the garage, that 305 is on a chain fall on the way out. And he almost had a heart attack. And 30 years later, and probably $100,000, here we are.
Right. So what year did you build this car then?
So it's a 77. I bought the car when I was 13 in 86. And it morphed into it is now. Like I said, originally we bought it with 36,000 miles on it, bone stock. When we bought it, the lady said, "Don't you want to test drive it?" And my father said, "Actually, we could care less because the motor's coming out and we don't really care how it runs." So, like I said, 305 turbo 350 transmission, manifolds, dual exhaust, and a small quadrijet, tube chassis, 540 big block with a power glide, and every combination in between that you could think of, including a 350 Olds diesel block crank and rods converted to gas, batten heads. I mean, you name it, and it's been in that poor car.
So I'm curious. That begs to ask the question: why so many combinations? And I will say that this was something I wanted to ask you too. So I was talking to Billy Lieber, I think earlier this week, and I don't know how you and he were talking about it, but you somehow got on the topic about the Holley Sniper EFI systems, and he had mentioned that I don't know if you had one or tried one or what it was, but I want to talk to you about that. But I guess the question that I have is, why all the different combinations? Are you kind of like me, that you're just the mad scientist and you get bored and you're like, I want to do something different just because?
I wouldn't call myself a mad scientist because that would be an insult to mad scientists. But I love technology.
Yeah.
I love different things, which I guess would explain the Vega wagon. The reason for the Olds motor, so I had small blocks up until that point.
Okay.
And my machinist that was helping me out was an Oldsmobile freak. And I had a stock block 400 small block Chevy that was literally on its last legs. I mean, it was like every weekend I was taking the rocker arms and retorquing the heads. And, you know, everything was moving. It was old. And because he's an Oldsmobile guru, he had this pile of Oldsmobile parts. And he's like, you know, you want to give it a shot. And as you know, you put an Ultra Bell on the transmission case. And if it's a tube chassis car, you make a front motor and a set of headers, and off you go.
Right.
So that's how that wound up. And then from that point on, there's been a big block in the car ever since. So just evolution. I enjoy working on them probably more than I enjoy racing. So anything that's new that I want to try, I wake up in the middle of the night with an idea, and I'm basically going to give it a shot. So
Sure. Now you had mentioned we talked a little bit. It was earlier today or yesterday. It might have been yesterday, but it doesn't matter. So you started off life as a mechanic.
Correct.
You were working, like you just mentioned, you were working for the first guy that hired you, and this guy bought your dad's shop, was what it was?
My dad's customers.
Okay.
So my dad was retiring, moving up to Massachusetts. And he, you know, when it's kind of a small town and other garage owners know each other. And my father just put it out there that, like, listen, this is how many customers I have. This is what I gross a year. Are interested in purchasing the customers. And I was lucky enough to have John Maturo respond. And when he did, he also said, I know that your son is there all the time. I want him to come work for me so that the customers see a familiar face. And I was 15 at the time.
Oh, wow.
I worked for him until my early 20s.
Yeah.
And with him being into racing, naturally my main gig was automotive, but I went out and rented a garage, and I started cutting up my own car and putting roll bars in friends' cars and whatever I could do on the racing end of it. And I owe John a lot of credit to, you know, gee, I wonder what this whole MIG welder thing is all about. So he'd go out and buy one, and the next thing you know, we're welding anything that's weldable together. And it just, you know, I would cringe if I saw probably the first 20 jobs that I've done now. But, you know, I definitely learned by just doing.
Yeah.
And hopefully not pissing people off in the meantime. But Yeah, and that's basically, I was always auto mechanic first, and then like on the side, very mini fabricator second.
Yeah, yeah. So then, did you basically kind of expand that shop then, just to venture out onto your own? Because when we had talked earlier, you had said you got your shop basically where it was self-sufficient. So is that
Right.
kind of that took place a period of time?
Yeah, so I worked for John for 6 or 7 years. And then I went to go work for a friend of mine to do automotive electronics,
Yeah.
stereos, alarms, remote starters, stuff like that. And I actually, it's fun to look back in your life and you figure out how you got to where you are. And like my father was there, he'll be the first one to tell you his extent of his electrical career is figuring out the difference between an 1156 and 1157 bulb and putting it in, and that was it.
Yeah, yeah.
So when I went to go work for my buddy Eddie, I learned a lot about electrical, and it turned out that I loved it.
Oh, okay.
Great. I mean, I absolutely loved it. So from that point, I called up my dad one day and I said, I really want to open up my own shop. And he was in Massachusetts, but no, excuse me 1 second. Go ahead now. He dog wouldn't hurt a flea. He was at his job, but he, didn't really like it, and he missed being self-employed. So he actually commuted a couple of days a week.
Okay.
We opened up our own shop, and then it came time for him to retire, and I took it over, and then it got to the point where you got a couple of really good employees working for you, and I have a very good friend of mine who had a transmission shop that closed.
Okay.
And he's managing my stuff.
Yeah.
I'm not there, and I have a good mechanic, and just kind of evolution. That's how it all went down.
Which brings us to where you are today, which I found really interesting. And Chris, you'll appreciate this. So as I'm talking to Pete the other day, he's like, "Yeah, I'm an automotive technology teacher." I think is the exact title that.
Yeah, yep.
So
That's
I had
the
assumed,
way.
yeah, I had assumed honestly that you had spent your your whole career in automotive technology as an educator, and you're like, "No, I've only been doing it for 3 years, and I absolutely love it."
Yep.
And so I guess what made you do that? I mean,
so my father had his best friend who passed away probably 5-6 years ago. He taught at a local high school, and when me and my dad had a shop, I was doing a tin work. It was a rotary import from the next town over, and he wanted me to do an aluminum interior in his car, wheel tubs, floors, tranny tunnel, all that stuff. And he came up and we were going over stuff with the car, and my father's friend walked in, and he was the student of his, and they hugged each other and how you doing, and it was great. And then when my father's friend Tony left, the customer of mine said to me, if it wasn't for that guy, I'd either be in jail or dead. And I don't know. I mean, when I tell you this happened in my early 20s, and I'm 48 now,
yeah.
I don't know why that stuck with me so much. But from that point on, I got hooked up with a couple of local high schools, and I would do internships at my shop.
Okay.
And I really enjoyed teaching. And one day I was sitting on my couch just like I am right now, and I don't know what gave her to get to mention it, but my wife said, why don't we find out what the requirements are to become a teacher at a state school?
Yeah.
And she looked up the college courses, and she said, why don't you just take one, and you'll learn about it, and you see if you'll like it. And from the first day that I took the class, it was like I wanted to bring in cupcakes for my birthday. It was just, I knew it was right where I wanted to be.
Yeah.
There happened to be a job opening while I was halfway through that first course, and I went on the interview, and I didn't get the job, but the guy running the interview followed me out And he said to me, listen, I'm going to level with you. We're going to give the job to the guy who's been the substitute here for the last 6 months. He's got all the credentials. The kids love him. We don't want to change anything. So he's going to get the job. But we don't want to lose you. Please stay on top of job openings and stuff. And please apply. We want you in the system. So 3 years ago, I went on another interview. I got the job. And after 2.5 years, this coming school year, I'm going to be the active department head. I got a promotion.
Wow, congratulations.
So it's beyond a shadow of a doubt, besides marrying the woman that told me to go take a college course. It's the best thing I ever did. So
that's
here
so
I
what,
am.
I'm curious. So what did you have to do? So you live in Connecticut, right?
That's correct.
So I'm assuming that the school that you work for is in Connecticut?
That's correct. Yep.
Okay. And so what are the requirements in Connecticut to be a teacher? What did you
to be a vocational teacher, you have to have at least 8 years experience in your field.
Okay, which you had that.
That was easy. You have to be an ASC Master Tech,
Okay.
which I already had.
Okay.
And you gotta, if they hire you, they give you X amount of time to get X amount of credits they give you the outline. These are the courses we want you to take.
Oh,
and
okay.
you have as much time to do it. And when you get 9 credits, you start out with your initial. When you get 9 credits, you go to provisional.
Yeah.
And when you get 30 credits, you go to professional. So that's basically how they do it. But they realized that there's a shortage of teachers. So that's why they have these initial and provisional certificates to get you in the door so that you could start earning while you're already doing the job.
Yeah, yeah. That's, it's great. I have to say that, I'm at the point, I guess now in my career where, I've said before, Chris might argue with me about this, but because Chris being an educator as well, and doing it for quite some time, and his wife's an educator too. His wife,
Yep.
Chris, your wife's a department head for the science program?
Right. Science at the high school over in Geneva.
Yeah. So I will say I would love to have a career where I felt like I was helping somebody.
Right.
And I've granted, in sales of what I'm doing, I'm helping customers solve their specific technical issues that they have at this point in time. But, I'd really like to feel like I'm really helping somebody,
Right.
giving education or working for, let's call it a nonprofit, somebody that needs some type of other help, stuff like that. The problem is that when you're really old like me, corporate America pays you pretty well, and
Right.
It'd be hard for me to say, all right, yeah, I'm going to up and leave all of this and go be an educator for 20% of what I'm making now. It's like I can barely afford to race now. I definitely wouldn't be able to afford to.
Yeah, wouldn't be able to handle it with that. And that's where I'm fortunate. My wife has a great job, and my shop running the way it is, I'm essentially making 2 paychecks.
Right.
I'm making it sound a lot easier than it is, because there are some times where it's like, oh my God, this life is killing me.
Right.
But at the end of the day, I don't know that I would change that much. That's for sure.
It's funny too, because I mentioned to you online that I now know at this point 2 guys I would call our shop teachers, and both of them are drag racers. Now maybe that's coincidental, just because of the fact that majority of my friends are probably drag
racers.
But,
guilty by association, yeah.
Right. But in both cases, I think it's funny because in both cases they are educators and they have other businesses at the same point in time. So It's like you talk about, being, the hardest working people out there, right? It's like, look, 1 job is hard enough. I don't want 2 jobs. I don't need 2 jobs. So I got to ask, and my guess is the answer is yes. I'm sure all your students must know that you're a drag racer.
Oh, yeah. So we have a system in our Votech schools where we have 12 shops. Ranging from cosmetology to plumbing to automotive.
Sure. Yep.
All the freshmen have to spend a certain amount of time in each shop their freshman year. It basically takes up the first 2 marking periods of the year.
Okay.
And you got to put on pom-poms. and you got to make it sound like what you have to offer is the best thing since sliced bread. And I played the race car card.
Oh,
Put a coat of wax on that baby and put it right in the middle of the shop and started it for them and did whatever I had to do to interest them in automotive.
sure.
It was a very big hit. So yes, they do know that I race. Even the ones that didn't take my shop know that I race. So
Yeah. And I was curious about that because I could definitely see. I've seen demonstrations at the schools where people have had race cars brought in and started the cars up and brought them in for the kids to look them over. And
right.
yeah, honestly, if I were an educator like yourself, yeah, part of my curriculum would be every year I'm going to bring the race car in for a day, and maybe it's early in the course, like you said, to kind of
Sure.
get the kids interested, right? I mean, it totally 100% makes sense.
The big learning aid with my race car was two advantages. One, when we did electrical, because everything is, like all my wires are nice and neat, but they're all exposed.
Right,
So it's very easy to say, look, this red wire is a 10 gauge. It goes here. It feeds this. My batteries are in the back. It's nice and clean.
right,
And the other thing is with the car coming completely apart, the hood, the nose off of it, the doors off of it, it's a really good teaching aid.
sure,
This year I'm going to pull the motor out to freshen it up. Well, the part of the freshman's curriculum is to remove an engine from a car. Now, granted, we're not pulling it out of a 76 Malibu,
right.
but how many freshmen do you know could completely take a motor out and put it back in? All the vacuum lines, all the hoses, all the
Right.
electrical. Starting out with my car is the simplest way to get their feet wet, and then they could, ramp themselves up as they move on in their career.
Right. It's funny you mentioned a 76 Malibu because actually pulling a motor out of a 76 Malibu is actually not that hard.
No,
Because
that was a bad example.
that was the first motor I pulled out because my first car was a 78 Malibu and it had a blown six-cylinder in it.
Yep.
And I bought a 76 Malibu and pulled the motor out of that in a junkyard and used that 350 in my 78. So it's
Put it
funny.
in there. Nice.
Yeah, it's funny you use that as an example, but so it's interesting with regards to the electrical issue. And I had mentioned to you, and it's probably a good segue for you to tell the story. So I mentioned to you pre-show that I was watching Racers News Network a couple of weeks ago, and you were talking about your experience at Lebanon Valley, and I think you were kind of giving a recap of the winners from the previous weekend and stuff like that. And I think, correct me if I'm wrong, I think this was coming off of your experience right there at the Lebanon Valley LOG press event.
Sure was, yeah.
And,
I still had steam coming out of my ears if you look close enough into the camera.
So, the short story is for people that are watching is that you were having an issue where you were going to Lebanon Valley, and again, correct me if I'm wrong, but this problem where you were getting red lighted only seemed to happen basically once eliminations came around. So you go up for time runs were fine, and it happened like, I don't know, it was 3 times in a row that you went to Lebanon Valley or something like that.
Yep.
So I guess I'd love to have you tell that story kind of the way you did during your podcast, because I found it to be really, really interesting.
So knowing Division I divisional races and open races, that we travel as far south as Virginia, as far north as New Hampshire. We go to Pennsylvania, Numidia, ACO, hopefully. I've only had this problem at Lebanon Valley. And it's very inconsistent. You never know when it's going to happen. So dating back to last year, I raced the Kenny Van Gorder and Lori Butler. They put on a .90 series. And I race up there, and I also help support them too.
Okay.
And I went up there last year once. And during eliminations, as I'm pulling into the beams, the top bulb goes on. Then I move in a little further and the top bulb goes out. Then I move in a little further and it goes on. Then the other one comes on. Then and it was like, my car is very, very low. Okay. So needless to say, with all those blinking lights, I got the red light.
Yeah.
And I know that my car is low. And it's funny part of the story. Grant Nichols, who is a hitter of all hitters up there.
Yeah.
I was racing him, and he's the type of guy, great guy. I mean, he will beat you like a drum and then come over and give you a beer, and you can't possibly be mad at him. He's that kind of guy, you know?
Yeah.
But when you race him, you really want to bring your A game. So, of course, it was him that I raced in the second round.
Yeah.
And I got red lighted, and he came over and he goes, "What is going on with your car?" And I said, "Dude, I don't know what's going on." And he goes, "Your car's too low." He goes, "You want to know how I know?" And I said, "How?" He takes his friggin' boot off and he starts shoving it under my car. He goes, "If the front part of the boot doesn't fit and it hits something, I know it's going to hit the beams and give you a false like the tires." I'm like, "Okay, sure." So I went home. I put an inch taller tire on the front of the car.
Yeah.
And I screwed up the front struts 3/4 of an inch.
Okay.
Okay. Go back this year. Before the division, another .90 race.
Yeah.
And I'm bumping the car in, and I hit the trans brake button, and the bottom stage bulb, it's not even flickering on and off. It's like it's shorted out. It's like it was the craziest thing. It was like an electrical, and I'm like, here we friggin' go. And of course, as soon as the tree came down, it went red.
Yeah.
So I said, you know what? I think that was me, that I was just so shallow. If I used my pea brain, I probably would have just turned the steering wheel a little bit, just to stop the light from doing whatever the hell it was doing.
Sure.
So I'm like, okay, that's on me. I probably just wasn't in deep enough. So I go up for the divisional. I go to test and tune on Thursday. 3 passes, no issues. Lights were great. Everything ran great. 2 time trials on Friday. Perfect. I get 1 time trial on Saturday. Perfect. First round of eliminations on Sunday. Perfect. I'm 008 and I run a dead 6. I'm ready. I'm ready to bring it.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
I go in second, light the first bulb. I go to hit the second bulb. I hit the button. Bulb goes out. Tree goes red. And I'm like, I can't believe I'm leaving Lebanon Valley for the 3rd time in a row, and I haven't lost. Right?
Right.
I mean, I lost, but I mean,
Right.
I haven't lost. I lost because of a red light.
Yeah.
This one was so bad that I saw the red light go out. I didn't even let go of the trans brake button. I literally didn't move the car.
Yeah.
My red light came on, and I just sat there, shook my head, backed up, and went to the trailer, and that was it. Well, now I'm fuming.
Right.
And I don't know what gave me the common sense to keep my big mouth shut, because that's not in my resume. But I was able to keep my big mouth shut, and thanks to NHRA TV, even though I was having all these problems and it was a constant thing, I wanted to do the research, and I looked, and I could see as clear as day that the car backed up.
Yeah.
And it was minute. What I had to do was I had to watch the spokes on my front wheel. I have like a 5-spoke wheel.
Yep.
And I could just see the spoke, and it went, and it was just because I staged the car so shallow that if it does anything, it's going to pull me out of the beam.
Yep.
And I was so grateful that I didn't run my mouth, because Lebanon Valley, for some absurd reason, has a reputation for a crazy timing system, or track not prepped the way it should be, or lightning striking, or it's the circle track's fault.
The circle track, yeah, I've heard that one.
Yeah, you name it. The weather's crazy.
Wait a second.
You name it, they'll find a way to blame it.
It's the dirt track, Chris. That's exactly what it is.
Right. And truth be told, I love the track. I love going there. I love the people that are there. And I went from, on my way home, saying to myself, I can't keep investing the money that it takes to go racing at this one track where I can't stage the car.
Right.
And I've tried stuff and I can't figure out why, but I'm just going to have to keep going to other tracks, because I don't have this problem at other tracks.
Yeah.
And then, you go home, you go to sleep, you cool off, And then you wake up the next and you're like, this track puts thousands of passes down it daily. And these people aren't having these problems. So what the hell is going on? What am I doing wrong?
Yeah.
And that's when the temper fades and the common sense starts to take over. And sure enough, clear as day. And ironically, I was working on the car this week, and I think what caused it is my air shifter. I had no air gap between the plunger and the handle when it was in low. So I checked my band adjustment, and in order for me to check the band adjustment, I had to take the linkage off.
Okay.
So I checked the adjustment. It was right on the money. I put the linkage back on, and I said, you know what, let me double check this. So I lower it down. I put it in low, and I'm looking at it, and I go, that shouldn't be touching. And sure enough, I line it all up, and it's off probably 3/16 of an inch.
Just to push the forward.
I think it was just enough that I might have just started opening the valve in the valve body for high gear, and some pressure loss.
Yeah.
And it just took the band a little extra time to grab. And so nothing to do with the track, nothing to do with the timing system, the dirt track, the way the sun's facing, the polarity of the moon, nothing. It was a mechanical malfunction.
Right.
The first time the car was just too low for that track, which is not a big deal. If there's a rule in the rule book of 3 inches, I'm sure I wasn't clearing it anyways. So again, I'm not blaming the track.
Sure.
The second time could have been a combination of the problem I found and me just not putting it in far enough.
Yeah.
And again, 3 times in a row where I go from I can't race there anymore to God, I'm an idiot, and I think I got it figured out. So we'll see what happens.
Well, I guess at this point, at this point, it's one of those things where you think you found it, right?
Right.
I guess first test is to go back to Lebanon Valley since.
If the next time I go to Lebanon Valley, I could lose first round as long as I'm going through the track and I see the other person's light come on. I'll be like, woohoo! I competed, thank God. Yeah, I left the starting line. Hallelujah.
It's funny how something as simple as that, right? I mean, let's assume that for now that's what the issue is. I had a somewhat similar issue with a shifter, and I don't know what you have in your car. I mean, I have a first quarter stick. I mean, it's like the simplest thing in the world, right?
Yep.
And a couple of years ago, IHRA had their sportsman divisional at Empire, and car running great, and I think it's a double even for some reason. And I go up for first round, and trying to think of what happened. Oh, you know what it was? I did my burnout. I pull out, and I pull the car back into first, and the car shuts off. And I'm like, what the heck? And I'm like, that's really bizarre. And so car won't start. I'm like, I don't know. So push the car off. I lose.
Right.
And it had blown a fuse. And I'm like, well, that's kind of weird. Don't know why the heck it would have blown the fuse, but I'm like, okay, fine. So put a new fuse in and made a couple of time runs for like the next race, and the car was fine. And go up to pull up for first round of the next race, and I'm in the staging lanes, and it's like I start the car up, it's in park, and as soon as I pull it back down into first, the car shuts off. And I'm like, what the heck is going on? And come to find out that the line lock wire, so I have my line lock button just zip tied to the shifter handle.
Sure. Yep.
It was getting squashed between the electric shifter and the shifter handle, and I'd pull it down and I'd squash that wire in, and sometimes it would be fine, and sometimes it would short out and it would blow the fuse and the car would shut off.
Unbelievable.
And yeah, I mean, it took me a better part. Thankfully, I guess the good news is that it was only one weekend that it took me to find it, but same situation, right? Of course, it couldn't have happened on a normal bracket race weekend at Empire, right? It had to happen at IHRA divisional, where I spent $500 in entries and everything else to race 2 events, and but yeah, and it's crazy because just something really simple like that.
I mean, there's so many more ways to lose than there are to win. It's unbelievable.
Oh, there is a ton for sure.
Yeah.
Absolute ton. Well, so the moral of the story is that, yeah, basically, if you're having a problem at a specific track, don't necessarily blame the track. Take a look in the mirror, look at your
Right.
stuff,
Right.
and see.
It's as we were talking earlier before the show started. We have to be extremely careful about what we put track management through and what we say about a track. And I mean any track. Um, it's we're watching them. It's like every day you open up Facebook with one eye, and it's like, is another one going to close?
Right.
It's guys. I would take a gravel track with a flag starter and dirt pits over staying home and not having a place to race. And I'll bet you if you ask 99% of the racers, they will all say that, but you wouldn't know it by looking at them,
Right.
by the way they act when they're there. And, I'm not trying to badmouth anybody, but at the end of the day, I mean, I was devastated when Englishtown closed. And I'm not even a regular Englishtown racer. I only went there, twice a year, probably once for the national and once for the divisional. And I was devastated when it closed because of the history.
Sure.
The coolest thing I ever saw, two cool things that I saw. My first national that I raced there, when they called us for first round eliminations, they sent me down the road of the pros. They were directing traffic.
Yeah. Yeah.
I had to drive underneath Brandon Bernstein's dragster that was hanging out of the lift gate. And I'm like totally starstruck. And I'm like, whoa, this is cool,
Right.
And a couple of years later, I ran my elimination round for the day. And me and my wife were driving around on the golf cart, and we're at the wall right before they come out of the lanes and go under the tower.
Yeah.
And stock is running, and Big Daddy Don Garlitz is driving a drag pack car. And I'm like,
Yep.
If you're into the history of the sport at all, you're just like, man, that might be the coolest thing in drag racing I've ever seen. Big Daddy with an open face helmet and a drag pack racing stock eliminator, So stuff like that, we're not going to see at Englishtown anymore. And it's heartbreaking.
Oh, I say, I forget who it was that reported they had a drift event. I think it was at Englishtown a couple of weeks ago.
Yep.
And there was a picture of the guys like drifting underneath the tower, right? And some drag racing media personnel had posted, it's like, it just seems wrong, like totally wrong that they would be doing this. And I have to say, it's like, I looked at that picture and I'm like, my first reaction as well was, man, I can't believe that this is what the track has been relegated to, a drifting track. Let's have some car shows here. We're going to have a swap meet. I mean, it's incredible to me. And, as we mentioned, before coming on the air, it's not just Englishtown, it's ACO. I mean, Atlanta's closed. Now, Houston this week was mentioned that they're closed. Memphis is closing.
Yep.
Island is not running this year, and I don't know whether they're going to ever open it back up again. Who knows? I mean, what the long-term future is for Maple Grove.
Right.
I mean, it's, as a drag racer, it's kind of scary, actually.
It's very scary. And if you partially make your living fabricating and working on race cars.
Yeah.
I look out in the driveway and, I've started, like I said, I had my Vega when I was 13 years old. I mean, I've got 35 years of building up my inventory to what it is. Right. And you look out in the driveway and you see the motorhome and the trailer and the spare engine and all that stuff. And you wonder, is this stuff going to be worthless in a couple of years? Because there's nowhere to use it. Could I put sand tires on the back of this thing and do something? Headlights fit. What do I do? It's scary. It's very scary.
Yeah, and I guess the good news for us locally here in Rochester is that Empire is probably about 30 miles south of Rochester, and it's in an area that Rochester's not a huge town. It's population of 250,000 people, and you get 3 miles south of here, and you're basically out in the middle of farmland. You're a long ways away from suburbia, and because of the way New York's population is not growing, thanks to our wonderful governor and all the taxes and everything else that we pay, it's probably Empire is probably not going to have an issue of being worth more as a plot of land than it is racetrack. So we're in good shape here, but yeah, I mean, you look at all these tracks that have such a history to them, and they're all in jeopardy. I mean, honestly, let's be honest, right? I mean, it's amazing to me that Pomona is still open.
Right.
With the property values in Southern California, what it is, I mean, I cannot believe that the fairgrounds there are still there. I mean, I would have thought that that would have been dozed over and made into a housing tract a long time ago.
Right.
And yeah, they're not the only one. I'm sure we could go across the country and just look.
Oh yeah, yeah. I heard when I was at the divisional race, and I have no idea if it's fact or fiction, but I heard that the owner of Lebanon Valley got an offer from the same people that are involved with Englishtown and Atco. I heard that he turned it down, but what's concerning to me is why they're preying on these racetracks. You know, like a lot of people had a lot of bad things to say about the Nat family.
Yeah.
When Englishtown, you know, and business is business, providing for your families, providing for your family.
That's right.
But I don't know how many acres that facility is. But the one thing that stuck out in my mind is I know they have a road course, BMX, you know, all the where they would stack everybody during a national event. They got a lot of real estate. So let's just say it's 30 acres.
Right.
Okay. Well, IAA is using probably 3 or 4.
Yeah.
So with all the room that they had at Englishtown, why did the owners of Englishtown elect to bag drag racing versus all the other stuff that they got going on in the property? And I know why they did it, and you know why they did it, but a lot of people don't want to admit why they did it.
Well, and I would say with Englishtown too, a lot of people don't realize this. They had 2 tracks. There's a quarter-mile track and an eighth-mile track.
That's where junior drag racing originated.
Right.
On that eighth-mile track at Englishtown. Right. Yeah.
And like you said, they sold a portion of the track, but from there they just said, we're done with drag racing. No more drag racing. We're not doing it.
And listen, I know that part of the reason, we'll say 50% of the reason, is from the neighbors complaining about noise and the lawyers and the fight and all that. I know that was a big part of it. But I still think that if drag racers supported that track the way they should have, and they didn't piss on as much as they did, I'm not saying it would have changed the decision, but I'll bet you it would have been a hell of a lot harder for them to make the same decision that they made.
Right. Yeah, and we have, I mean, I will say again, I'll use Empire as an example. So Jerry Scatia, I mean, he's the owner of Empire. He's put a ton of money into the track. I mean, this year, the biggest thing that he did is he improved the drainage in the pits and he widened the roads. And it's incredible because it's gone from being at what I feel like your standard local backyard drag strip to now when you pull in and you're driving down the roads in the pits to get to your pit area with your rig, it's like, I feel like I'm actually at a national event track. It's like
really
space. The cars are parked on either side. I'm driving down the middle. I don't feel like I'm, having to constantly watch my mirrors because I'm going to hit something.
Right.
And it's like just widening the roads like that's incredible. Concrete walls, repaving the shutdown. I mean, the amount of money that he's put into the place is incredible. And as part of that, he's had to increase part of the entry fees. And around here in particular, I mean, the cost of living in Western New York is fairly low compared to downstate. And, a lot of people will start to fight geez, you want to raise the entry fee from, $60 to 75 or whatever it might be.
Right.
And in the end of the day, it's like, percentage wise, it might be a big increase. But when we look at what we do and the cost of what's associated with it, when you talk about an extra $20 or $30 or $40, whatever it might be, it's really in the noise. It's totally in the noise.
Right.
And if this is the difference of between my track, local track staying open because they're able to make a little bit of money and then again reinvest some of that back into the track versus closing completely, for God's sakes, yeah. I mean, and again, I don't want to ruin it for everybody, right? I don't want to tell Jerry, hey, raise your entry fees $100. I'm all in.
Right.
But
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, again, from that standpoint, if you go from Empire, the next closest tracks that we have are Lancaster and Esta, which are an extra hour away. And you
Right.
think about what's the cost to tow an extra hour? Not just the cost, not even your time, right? Just
Right.
what's the cost to tow an extra hour?
Right.
In my mind, it's like, man, this is where, like you said, racers have to support their local tracks and yeah, not necessarily go on the internet and just bitch about, okay, I hate this, I hate that. But yeah, you don't like something, okay, that's fine.
Right.
Go and talk to the track owner, man to man, right? And say,
Sure.
hey, is there something we could do to improve this situation?
Right.
So
Unfortunately, social media is the best thing and worst thing
right.
for something like that.
Yeah.
It really is. I mean, people, like I said, and listen, I know I've been guilty of it, and I will never deny it. But just the fact that after the last incident that I had at the Valley, that as angry as I was able to, maybe it's because I'm getting older. I have no idea. My wife isn't afraid to hit me either when I run my mouth, so that's good too. But it's honestly, I think a lot has to do with all these tracks surviving coming out of COVID and knowing that tracks are harder and harder to come by. And as mad as I was, I think in the back of my head, I'm like, just keep your friggin' mouth shut and let's figure out what's going on without, running your mouth. And essentially, I would have made myself look like even more of an idiot than I already am because I was dead wrong.
Right.
It had nothing to do with the track. So,
right.
People just need to think a lot because, man, I don't want to see any more tracks close. I really don't.
No, me neither. Now, from the social media aspect of it, I mean, one thing that social media does allow us to do is it does allow us to have these types of conversations like we're doing here, right?
Right.
And I guess I'd like to touch on, so how did Racers News Network come about, and what's your total involvement with that, and how did you get involved with that?
So Chris had a network. I don't know if you've ever heard of it or not, but it was Wheels Up Radio.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Okay, so that was Chris's baby.
Okay.
And he got involved with some people that it basically just boiled out to be difference of opinions.
Okay.
And nothing intentional, nothing malicious.
Yeah.
But between that and some personal stuff that Chris was going through at the time, he basically just pulled the plug on it.
Okay.
And I wasn't involved with that program besides being on it a couple of times. And, I think I won a couple of races while he was doing that program. So they had me on for an interview. And, and I think I sponsored a race, $100 and, we're going to do a live at this track and we're sponsored by Straight Line Automotive or whatever.
Yeah.
Then when he shut that down, I don't know, maybe a year and a half went by, 2 years went by, and Chris and I always stayed in touch with each other. And I told him, I said, dude, it's time. It was good. We're lacking this in the sport.
Yeah.
Let's do it. And I told him, I said, the only thing that I'm going to tell you is at the end of the day, regardless as to how I feel or what my opinion is, this is your show. Okay? If you ask me for my advice, I'll give it to you. I might give you advice without you even asking me for it.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, this is your show. You run how you see fit. And, he bounces a lot of stuff off me. He tends to be not quite as politically correct as the drag racing society needs to be sometimes.
Yeah.
And, he'll be the first one to admit it. He's like, I want to do this. What do you think? And I'm like, maybe just, a little bit, and we'll laugh about it. But it's a pretty good team. And we recently hooked up with Jerron Settles. Do you know
Yeah,
Jerron?
yeah,
The Flying Airbrush, and
yeah.
he knows some pretty big names. So we're able to get some good names, and we don't want just the hitters on there. We like having our local people on too. But we got Scotty Wheels, who does all the heads up stuff, and we crucify him every chance we get. I do all the .90 stuff for obvious reasons.
Yeah.
Chris is a big super stock fan, and then we all kind of take turns with the pros and stuff. And yeah, it's just, it's funny because you do the show, and you look up in the little corner of the window and you see, 20 people are watching, 30 people are watching, 8 people are watching, whatever,
Right.
But then you go to the racetrack, and like the last time I was at Lebanon Valley, the tech inspector was teching my car. It's like, okay, you got this, you got that. Yep. He hands me my card back, and he goes, by the way, I love your show. And it was like someone that you wouldn't even think watches it. It was just, it's cool. And a lot of people reach out, and it's definitely something that we need. So, we got involved with it, and that's how we're doing it. And we're having a good time.
Yeah, it's funny because just like yourself, it's like I would say probably almost every time I'm at Empire, I will have somebody come up to me and say, "Yeah, I listen to the show or watch the show all the time. Like I love it. I'm glad you really do it." And we really concentrate. We try to really focus for ourselves. A lot in the Western New York area. So let's call it from Southern Ontario to Syracuse area, really, and kind of focusing in on that area. But obviously, we still like to cover and have guests on that are in the general Northeast area. I mean, obviously, we do expand out. We've had Jeff Jackson on the show a couple of times, so we'll have some guys out from the Pacific Northwest on every once in a while.
Right.
Yeah, really try to make it more of a regional show and kind of get this area some exposure and talk about things that are going on not only in the drag racing world nationally, but kind of locally as well. And yeah, it blows me away every time I'm at the track and I have somebody come up. In a lot of cases, it's people that I don't know. They come up to me and tell me, it's like, yeah, I watch the show all the time. I listen to it. It's like, I'm in the background, working in the shop or whatever, and I turn the show on. I listen to it while I'm working. It's like, I mean, that's for me. Yeah, that's the reward, I guess, that I get out of it. But it's like, okay, yeah, I realize that at any one point in time, we might not have 1,000 viewers watching. But yeah, I mean, heck, if a few hundred people end up tuning in and watching the show over the course of a couple of weeks because they enjoy it and they find it somewhat entertaining about drag racing, great, then I'll keep doing it.
Absolutely. We've tried to make it as cover as much territory as possible. And I reached out, I've got names of people that like in Division 2 at, let's say, Gainesville. They run a .90 series, much like how we do with the Northeast, Super Street Association up at Lebanon Valley. And yeah, I'll get back to you with the schedule. And I'm like, listen, send me an email once a week of who the winners are in your schedule and stuff. And I just can't get them on board. I mean, we're not soliciting them for money. I just, listen, if you're in Division 2 and you just want to race, I want to call out your name.
Right.
I don't want money. I don't want nothing. It's racing. You won. I want to say, hey, congratulations, you won.
Right.
And I just can't. It's turning into a Division 1 thing. And listen, I'm not going to complain about it, but I would love to be able to branch out. Now, listen, I know, out in California, we're on at 7:00 at night, which means it's 4:00 over there. So I don't expect people to tell their boss, hey, I'm leaving an hour early because I want to go watch this show. But
yeah,
it's, you try as best as you could, but at the same time, I'm not going to lose any sleep over it either. If they don't want to do it, they don't want to do it.
Hey, what were you going to say, Chris?
Well, that era went out in probably 2004, 2005. That used to be the standard, where email would have the results distributed to some sort of server list and stuff, and that era has since passed because look at the number of tracks that have outdated websites. This is probably more common, I would guess, in the circle track side of things than necessarily in the drag racing side, but it's not uncommon to come across unupdated information on Google searches for their Google listings. It goes to a website that's since been changed due to track turnover. And the
Yeah.
reliance of sharing all that information is just out there on Facebook, and it's passive. Nobody's actively trying to get coverage for their tracks with their results and their winners. If you can promote your winners, then your winners can promote their sponsors. And if the winners can promote their sponsors, they can keep racing. We're getting to the point of the year where some of the tracks, that we're running support divisions, again, looking mostly at oval track stuff, just in this scope. They were running 12 cars or so. Now you see the fields are down to 4, 5, because they've run out of money. Now, I'm not going to sit here and say that if you would have put this hobby stock racer's name in the press release somehow and sent it around to every podcast out there on the planet, that they would somehow still be racing. But by not doing it, you didn't even give them the chance.
Right.
Yeah.
So we had an issue last week. I don't know if you tuned in last week or not, but they had at Lucas Oil Race out in Oregon.
Yeah.
Oregon.
Jeff Jackson won of those races.
We didn't get the results. I mean, I get home. I try and get home around 5 o'clock, eat dinner with the family. Our show comes at 7. So I'll start at like 6 o'clock. I'll go on Drag Race Results or Drag Race Central. And I'll start looking, and we had nothing until the point where the guests that we had, normally we like to do the race results for the first 15 minutes, and then we tell our guests to come on at 7:15.
Sure. The
guest we had last week, he had to come on right at 7 because he had a prior engagement that started at 7:45. So we did the race results afterwards. Well, that turned out to be a blessing because they posted the race results around 7:15. So it was like, and then who the hell wants to do the race results a week and a half later on next Monday's show? It's right. Then we thought about maybe switching the show to Tuesday or Wednesday night so that we could do the results, give them a couple of days. But in the information age, it's a hell of a lot harder to get the information than it should be, in my opinion.
Well, this was, this was the complaint that everybody had about National Dragster, right? It's like, look, I mean, you're sending me a paper. I'm paying for my membership. You're sending me a paper, which I like. But the problem is I'm reading results that are a month old by the time I get the paper. And I realize it takes time to put stuff together, but it's like, it's not valuable to me to read about results from a month ago when meanwhile, I may have even gone to local events, right? I've gone to Columbus or at the time Englishtown or where at Maple Grove and competed myself and already heard what all the results were from that race that you're now sending me this paper on. And it's like that was a huge problem with National Drag.
Yeah, I was fortunate enough. I runnered up at the national event in Englishtown, and it's like all you want is to get the National Dragster so you can see your picture in it. I think I got the paper 2 weeks before the McGraw National event. It's like, holy Christ, I don't even remember what the hell I did anymore. I'm dying to see this thing.
Right.
But yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah, and the guest thing, I will say that we run into the same type of thing that you guys do. That anybody that's listening to or watching the show, if you are actively involved in drag racing and you feel like you'd be a good guest, you have a story to tell. I mean, definitely reach out to us. We'd love to have you on because it doesn't necessarily, and I will say, it doesn't even necessarily have to be somebody that's even active now. I mean, if you have a history in drag racing, again,
absolutely,
I like to cover that too. We've had plenty of drag racers that are long retired, and I mean, it's probably Chris's favorite shows, talking to the guys that raced in the mid to late '60s to the late '70s, right? Now they're retired. It's like, people like to hear those stories about how the evolved and how we got to where it is today. And hopefully we'll both of us will be able to get a few more guests to willingly come on the show and spend some time with us talking about drag racing.
No doubt, absolutely.
So here we are. We're pretty much right at the hour right now. So before we let you go, I guess, is there anybody that you'd like to kind of reach out to, give thanks to, sponsors you'd like to thank, that type of thing?
Yeah, I mean, the number one thing, obviously, is support from the family. I used to go racing by myself all the time. I always think to myself, there's a big difference between having blessing to go racing and having support to go racing.
Agreed.
And when I had the blessing, I thought I was the luckiest guy in the world until I had support.
Yeah.
And it makes all the difference in the world. The people that helped me out, I got my buddy Anthony from Accurate Transmissions that helps me out tremendously. James Antonetti, JA Power, he builds my motors. Anyone who's ever helped me with the program, Bud McNasby and Lee Zane. Bud helps me with tuning. Bud and Lee both help me keep my head screwed on straight. Big Mike that works with me, that helps me on my car. We work together, and he's an employee of mine. He's a friend first. He's an employee second. And whenever I have stuff I do on the car and I need help, I always tell him I'm paying him to be my friend today to work on the car. And of course, he never takes any money from me at the end of the day when it's all said and done. But it's all those people that help and support that make all the difference in the world.
It does, and the family thing is certainly really big, for sure. I see. So we got Chris just messaged me. He said Rob Keister wants that $100 back from Pete.
Chris is the king of cryptic messages. That, like, when I call him an hour from now and say to him, "What the hell were you talking about?" he'll figure out a way for it to make sense. But right now, I'm drawing a blank.
You're drawing a blank.
That's Rob Kester made the comment in the live chat, and I sent that over to Jason so that he could weave that in at the finish.
I didn't see it. I didn't see Rob's message. I'll have to reach out to Rob to see what.
So on another note, and I'm glad Rob is tuning in, because that's one of the things that helps us tremendously. Is Rob is like automatic when he has one of his races.
Yeah.
Not only does he send us the results right away, but the detail that he sends. Right? There's nothing worse I like. There's nothing more I hate than to say Jeff Jackson won Super Street. Oh, great.
Right.
That's
right.
How about he put an 8-pack together?
Sure.
And his average reaction time for the whole day was a 12. I mean,
Yeah.
Isn't that a lot more exciting than saying, "Oh, by the way, he won"?
Yeah.
Rob gives great detail, and so does Kenny Van Gorder with the Northeast Super Street Association. We love details, and it's great to have people like that associated with the show that will give us that stuff so that we could, put the people's name in lights.
Okay, well, that's a good lesson for me. So for our next Western New York Super Rod Association race, which is August, I want to say 18th, maybe. Let me see, pull up the calendar here. August 14th at Empire. I will make sure that I send you the results, and I will provide you with details so that you can report them on drag racer results.
That is Racer News Network.
Racer News Network. Yes.
I do what you meant.
Yes.
Yeah, but honestly, whatever results you got, weekly bracket racing, an individual series. Like I said, I just, if someone does the job of winning or running up or having a good showing, I want to talk about it. I want to mention them. Hell, we can even have them on the show. It's what it's all about. I remember when I was fortunate enough to knock down my race at Englishtown, my first divisional win. Chris, who I think I might have only Facebook messaged once or twice for God only knows what reason, he wanted me to come on the show. And it was like the coolest thing ever. And, my wife and kids tuned in, and, oh, my God, I could hear you, and they're interviewing you because you won. And that's one of those unexpected things that burn in your head, that something that you're never going to forget. And
that's right.
I remember that, so I want to do that for other people. But if I don't know, I can't.
Sure. Well, I will say I'll help you out any way I can. If,
awesome.
Like I said, I'll provide you results at least for our series. And if I happen to have somebody that I think you definitely need to talk to, I'll definitely throw them your way. And
fantastic. We'll gladly do the same. Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, Pete, certainly appreciate having you on tonight. Appreciate you spending the time with us and working with us to be flexible.
Yep, no
We
problem at all.
obviously we didn't touch on some of the subjects. Like I said, I really do want to talk to you about the Holly sniper system, but
Yep.
we'll have to either do that offline or maybe leave that for the next
Yeah,
show.
I'll come on anytime. Now that you set the bar nice and low for your guests, everyone you have from here on out will get better and better. When you feel like you got to hit rock bottom again, give me a call and we'll talk about the sniper.
All right, that sounds great. Well, thanks a lot, Pete. Really appreciate the time.
No problem. Thanks for having me on, guys.
All right, take care.
Take care.
There goes Pete Sanca wrapping things up. Appreciate Pete coming on and hanging out with us for a little while. The context of that, Rob said that Rob had to pay Pete to come on the show, and he just said he doesn't bribe anyone anymore, so he wants his $100 back. Episode number 94 in the books. Jason, man, appreciate you being flexible as well with all this stuff. The soccer continues on. We had a couple ties last night. We got some camps this weekend, and next Monday we got a couple games as well. So that'll be good. We look forward to maybe we can leverage this remote thing a little bit more going forward, and we'll have a little bit more content. We can juggle the day with it this way as well, because now it's not nearly as challenging to get that time in the studio. So for Pete Sanca, make sure you jump online, check out the Racers News Network. Jason Oldfield, he's got to go screw some more really expensive lenses into really tiny cameras over there at the home office. I'm Chris Morkworth. That's going to do it for this one, coming from the home studio remote, but of course always airing on FingerLakes1.com and FingerLakes1.tv. That's going to do it for episode number 94 of the Final Round Drag Racing Podcast. We'll see y'all next time.